Hello everyone and welcome back to my opinion. And the third test of the Border Trophy starts tomorrow in Indore. Ever since the completion of the previous test, there's been an increased debate and increased scrutiny as to who should start alongside Rohit Sharma in one of the opening slots for this next game, whether that should be Shubman Gill or Rahul. And it's for that reason that I'll be giving my views in this video not only on that debate, but as to who I think the top four should be for India in Test cricket, not only for this Test series, but for beyond as well. Now, on the debate in question as to whether Shubman Gill or Rahul should start in tomorrow's game, I'd like to reiterate the fact that I believe that Rahul's ability as a batsman is unmatched. I think that in the impact innings that we've seen him play, albeit with not too much consistency, the talent has been on show, and I think that there really have been some brilliant overseas centuries. And the last time he was consistent in this format was in 2017, where I think Australia toured in that year when the Border Trophy was being played. And after India lost the first game of that series, Rahul's contributions were they played a part along with the bowlers, and that was the reason why India could win the last two games out of three to clinch the series 2-1. Of course, a player with a lot of ability, and like I've said, I believe his talent is unmatched at this point in time. And I think that's the reason why the management has backed him for so long, and I do believe in that talent. But looking at his overall career so far, 47 games, 81 innings, averaging 33.4, you'd think that, especially in terms of the player pool and domestic circuit in the domestic circuit as of now, you could get returns that are much higher theoretically from the players that are available. And I've implied this before, but I'll say it again, that especially when playing at home, I believe that India have the luxury to not field their top six at all, play an all domestic top six, and overall have a better chance to win the series, especially with how they fare with the bat. Simply because I believe that the domestic players play spin much better than the more commercial players, and I think that had more domestic players been playing in this first 11 against Australia, we would not have seen a case where India were 139 for 7 on the brink with an 8th wicket partnership being needed to bring them back into the game from that point. And I think there are three players in question. And before I go into that, of course, on the Shubman Gill versus Rahul debate, Shubman Gill averages 32 in his not too old Test career so far, 13 games, and he's been in decent form in the last while. I thought the 91 in that Test match that would go into folklore against Australia a couple of years ago in his debut series overseas, I think, and also, I think actually made his debut in that series as well, and was part of such a brilliant game by the end of it. Also, the recent 100 against Bangladesh, and his selection was justified from his first-class record, because from the very start, he averages 52 in his first-class record, and he strikes at almost 70. And that 268, that is his highest score, was hit very early on in the piece. So he deserved this call up. I believe with how talented that he is, I believe he is on the trajectory for improvement. And so based on who can offer you more in the short term, as of now at least, with the level of talented players that you are dealing with here, that answer has to be Shubman Gill for now. I believe that right now, especially for a home series, for example, there isn't a necessity to start Rahul in the side, and I don't believe it is the end of the world, and it's not the end of the world for him, and it wasn't the end of the world for the next player I will be referencing here, and that is Ajinkya Rahane. Now, in a 9-year period, he's played 82 Test matches, 140 innings, averaged 38. In the last few years of his India career so far, at least, we've seen that he's also been a player that has got a lot of impact knocks under his belt, but not necessarily the consistency. I think over time, with the top order in general not producing the amount of runs as consistently as it would have a few years back, And a lot of the time, the middle and lower order having to provide rescue efforts like we did see in this series as well. I believe that it was a decision that needed to be made to kind of get players in with the high averages from the domestic circuit, for example. Now, I believe that Rahane should still be back in the side at 5, at least for overseas tests, and I'm not too convinced that Sherzad can come up with the goods in South Africa or Australia, for example. And that brings me on to my next point, is because if you told players like KL Rahul, Virat Kohli, for example, to go and play domestic cricket, players who, especially someone like a Virat Kohli, who hasn't been in that kind of a limbo for a long while now. He was backed in 2014, then he kind of went out of that slump and has not looked back since until now. And you've got these two players that, because they've been backed for so long, they haven't needed to really look back into the realm of domestic cricket. But right now, if you went to them and said you have to play domestic cricket, how would they react? And the reason why I'm saying this is because, look, as much as they wouldn't be used to it, the key for a domestic competition is that, of course, there has to be a high level of competition. There is that in the Indian domestic circuit. And if you're looking at the state size of the three players that I've just mentioned, KL Rahul, Virat Kohli and Ajinkya Rahane. For KL Rahul, you're looking at this Karnataka side and you'd think he would have to bat quite... Yes, I believe, look, with all three players that I just mentioned, a fully fledged version of themselves gets into this test side. There's no question about it. It's just that when they go into their domestic sides, they would not have easy. You've got a KL Rahul who has to compete with a Mayank Agarwal who averages 82 in 9 games, 3 centuries and 6 50s, and I have no idea why he's been left out of the squad for this series after an overreaction, I think. With him not having a great IPL, they did overreact and took him out of the test squad, even though he scored a 60 in the first innings in the first test against South Africa. And I believe that you saw Riley Russo in the SA20 not have a great tournament, but we all knew he wasn't out of form. And guess what? He goes to the PSL and is now scoring 70s every game at a strike rate of 200. So, unsurprisingly so, we've seen a case of Mayank Agarwal going back to the domestic circuit and continuing where he's left off. He was never out of form in the first place. So I thought it was an overreaction from them. You're competing with him, you're competing with an R. Samat who in 9 innings averages 60 with 300s and 250s. A Manish Pandey who averages 44 with 2 centuries as well. And a Nitin Jones, I think, 49.72 with 4 50s and 1 century in 9 games. So this is a team that's got to the semi-final of the Ranji Trophy. These players are clearly in very good form. Right now, KL Rahul's going to have to do a lot to average 40-odd over 9 games. He did it before, but he's going to have to do it again. Like I said, I do believe all these three players have the ability to do that if they are on song, but we should see how they go. A good sign for a domestic competition that it's not easy for the international players to go back in and kind of get back to the international side straight away. And with the way that this Karnataka side has been going with the bat, with the individual performances, Rahul would certainly have to be at his best to get back into the national setup. So yeah, that would be on that. Would he play domestic cricket even if he's not included for tomorrow's game? I don't know, but I think it would do him the world of good. You've seen Ajinkya Rahane, who I think that he kind of was dropped from the side for not producing consistently. And I think if I go to the stats page here, he's averaged 57 in 7 games, 2 centuries and a 50. I think with both Rahane and KL Rahul, do they have the fundamentals to succeed? Yes. And you've got the likes of Mayank Agarwal and Ajinkya Rahane, who you'd think would be the... if you're looking at brand names, for example, you'd think players like KL Rahul and Virat Kohli would be considered the bigger brands. You send players like Agarwal and Ajinkya Rahane back to the domestic side, they're capable players, and they've shown what they can do. I just feel like at one stage, you've got to kind of say enough is enough, and I do believe sending players that have underperformed, however high profile they are, back to the domestic circuit would do them a world of good. Rahane is also batting in a side, but you've just got a Prithvi Shaw who's done what he's done, a score of 379 recently. Sarfaraz Khan doing what he's doing, and he's still shining in that side as well, which puts him in contention. I don't think the selectors will look at him for now, but I don't understand it because he's still producing the results. And you've got a Virat Kohli, who I think that in the last 3 years in tests, the averages per year have been in the 20s. I think his test match game has deteriorated over time in the last 3 years, and that's the reason why we are seeing what we are seeing now. Yes, an unlucky decision in the previous game where he was dismissed for, I think, 44, where the ball, you'd think, did hit the bat on its way through to the pad. It seemed like it hit the bat and the pad at the same time, but with an ambiguity there, the decision should have been ruled as not out, but unfortunately it wasn't. Having said that, I've said this many times, and I'll say this phrase once again, the fundamentals aren't strong and haven't been strong for a while. His game in tests has been deteriorating for a while, and therefore at one point you think with the players that are available in the domestic circuit, with how well they are doing, like I said, in terms of home tests, India don't need to play these 3 players that I've mentioned, and they'll still win the series without losing a game. So with that regard, I think it should be a much more of an open pool. I think that players who score centuries every single game and still are not picked, it should not be the case. I believe that, especially for a home series, anyone who has been scoring bucket loads of runs should be getting opportunities, even at the expense of certain big names missing out. And you're looking at this Delhi side, someone like a Dhruv Shorey, 7 games, averaging 95 with 300s and 250s. You've got some other players here who average 45 and 46, VP Rawal and Himmat Singh. You'd think Virat Kohli at this point in time would have to bat out of his skin to average 45 with the way that his test career has been going the last while, with how the fundamentals in his game at this point in time are. And the reason why I think he should go back to domestic cricket is because I think we've seen a lot of time where has the reason for this slump been resolved, and the cycle has been that he takes a break or that some kind of thing around those lines. He comes back and plays against a weaker side, then he scores a lot of runs, albeit in ODI cricket, for example, or in T20s, and then he doesn't do much in tests, and then the same cycle kind of continues. I believe that in these cases, they've not been able to, whoever's been dealing with him has not been able to separate the reputation of the player from his current predicament. I believe they'll be able to do that better in the domestic circuit. You've seen Prithvi Shaw, I think a couple of years back, went with Praveen Amre, and they both kind of spent 5 days working on his technique. I don't know how much that has impacted him from that point to now, but from that point in time, in general, he has risen from where he was before. I do believe a domestic coach looking at Virat Kohli's game, separating the reputation of the player from his current predicament will certainly help him. And yeah, that's on that. I believe Megha Agarwal should be back in the side, and in tomorrow's game, you've got to think Shubman Gill should start. As much as I'm a fan of KL Rahul, I do think that Shubman Gill was on the trajectory of improvement with how he has been playing in the last while. And I think that in the short term, who are you likely to get more from in that opening slot? As of now, you've got to say that is Shubman Gill. So I do think that will be the call they will take tomorrow. And let's see how tomorrow's game goes. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Please share it with your friends. Remember, this is my opinion. What's yours?